Thank you for the opportunity to share some important findings from our team. We're specifically going to talk to you about a study led by one of my doctoral students that really looking at mortality after second cancer. Let me give you a little bit of context first. Our team has been really interested in looking into second cancer specifically. That is, individuals who've already had one cancer and now are developing a second cancer. The reason for this is there's been a lot of data suggesting over the last 10 years that the number of cancer survivors who are developing a second cancer is continuing to increase. This is because of improvements in screening and as well as treatment. But there hasn't really been a lot of research focused on the treatment of second cancers. We were interested to understand, to begin with, what is the impact on a cancer survivor who develops a second cancer. We initially looked at this by just comparing breast cancer survivors who develop a second cancer to those who don't. And what we found was very concerning, that breast cancer survivors who develop a second cancer, in fact, have a higher mortality versus breast cancer survivors who don't. We then went on to think about why this might be the case. Could this be due to toxicities from treatment? Could this be due to access to care? Is there something different in the biology of tumors in women who develop more than one cancer? The next thing we did was to try to understand who are these people who are having these high mortality from second cancers. And this is the paper that I'm going to talk to you about today. We looked at racial differences because we already know that certain races have a higher mortality from first cancers. So we looked across and we looked at Blacks, we looked at Hispanics and Asian Americans as well as white Americans. What we found was very concerning, that both Blacks and Hispanics had a higher rate of dying from a second breast cancer compared to whites and Asians. We also found that Blacks also had a higher chance of dying from endometrial cancer compared to whites. We also found that this was more in younger women than older women, and that Blacks also had a higher rate of dying from cardiovascular disease. So in summary, breast cancer survivors who develop a second cancer have a higher rate of dying than those who don't. And among breast cancer survivors, those who are Black or Hispanic, that rate is even higher. We are now at a stage where we are thinking more about why this is the case, right? We're concerned about multiple factors. Is this related to financial reasons? Is this related to access to care? Does it have anything to do with the type of treatments? We noted that Blacks and Hispanics are more likely to get chemotherapy, for example. Is this related to the underlying susceptibility of an individual? Is it related to the biology of the tumor? We're looking more closely at this. I think at this stage, we want to highlight this information so that both providers and survivors are aware of this, so that to begin with, they are continuing their screening, they are getting preventive checks as we try to understand further with the goal of reducing mortality among all breast cancer survivors. Current estimates were that at least 20% of breast cancer survivors develop a second cancer. We would like to see these reduced. I think another point I just want to mention that is, I think, very important is we often think that these second cancers occur much later after they develop a first cancer when breast cancer survivors are older. But what we found actually is more than 50% are occurring within 5 years of that first cancer. And again, these second cancers are occurring at a younger age in Black Americans, Hispanics, and also in Asians compared to whites. So there's a lot for us to look into and to understand. The other factor I did not mention is lifestyle factors. We need to understand what is the impact of that. For example, we know that body mass index, or BMI, is associated with many cancers. What role is that playing? My goal is to make you aware of these data and to tell you how important it is for us to continue to study second cancers and to understand this, because second cancers can impact breast cancer survivors and other cancer survivors to a large degree, and we need to start to understand this. This study was only in breast cancer survivors, but clearly we need to do this and look at this in all other survivors as well. That's a very important part of survivorship.